So far you've been introduced to this, what I call this yoga. We had a experimental meditation this morning and looked at some of the fine points after that, and then you've had some time to live with this or not this afternoon. So how's things going for people?
It's nice to have the opportunity to just, sort of move deeper into the experience of noticing in a continuous way without having to disrupt and go on.
Well, this is the luxury of a retreat. You're extricated from your life. You're basically here in the middle of nowhere, and you can reinvent yourself. You can be with it any way you want. You can live at the same old. You can just go through the motions and be who you always are, or you can be with it afresh and to various degrees. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the point. That's the power, the potential power of a situation like this. Is it can be really immersive, really intensive, really ongoing, if you choose to explore that kind of engagement.
It's very refreshing just to be, having a meditation. That's something I really enjoy at the retreats. That experience of being with others and sitting in that experience.
I've been noticing how frequently I want to be special.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, this is like we were talking about this morning. This whole issue of specialness is really the whole. It's the essence of this yoga. We are so subliminally and so ubiquitously identified with trying to be special, trying to matter, trying to find something that's something that's going to win, or avoiding something that's going to lose, or whatever, And again, we overlook the obviousness of this reality in the process, and by doing so, we shoot ourselves in the foot, because this reality is the only thing that can give us an actual payoff. And all of this chasing pie in the sky is just a way to torture ourselves. It's just a way to be involved and invested in fantasy and delusion, which can't pay off in very, spendable coin.
Yeah, it hasn't manifested as suffering because it's been at but it's just obvious that it.
Yeah, well, suffering is a very heavy-handed way of putting it. I mean, it's kind of a traditional spiritual, handle for this, but it's an investment of energy in a strategy that cannot pay off.
Yeah. Which
is essentially, it's suffering in the sense that you can't win. You're not going to win. So whether or not it shows up as an explicit suffering that you would call suffering per se, but you're cutting yourself off, not actually, of course, but effectively cutting yourself off from that which could be a win, by not letting yourself appreciate what you have and fixating on what you hope for or what you are trying to spin doctor into existence, which is just going to be a never-ending conundrum. You're not going to be able to win at that. For the simple reason that fantasy isn't actual, right? Mm-hmm. Even if you achieve your fantasies, it's going to be fantasies. this that is here is actual. This is real. It's nourishing. It supports you. It feeds you. It keeps you alive. It literally keeps you alive. Your life force is coming from this actuality. Your body is sustained within the context of and by this actuality. Anything you could possibly get is in this actuality, and is nothing but this actuality. So, this is the place to look if you're looking. And this is certainly the place to find, because you can't find anything anywhere else, because there is nowhere else. This actuality is the only actuality. Anything you've been finding yourself grappling with, or you've noticed has come up that seems to be of interest, or yeah?
I don't know how interesting it is, but after the midday session, I fell off the cliff.
In what sense?
In the sense that I was just like, very low kind of state.
Mm-hmm. And what category? Emotionally, physically?
Yeah, emotionally mostly.
Good. Very good. Not good per se, but good because that indicates that this is provocative. This retreat should above all be provocative. It should be impactful. Because if it isn't, then what's the point?
Yeah.
If it doesn't hit you in some sense, then why be here? Why spend the money? Why spend the time? And the details of how that works itself out in the long run, in terms of, maybe being of benefit or not, is takes care of itself. But the impact is what sets the seed for that eventuality to possibly transpire and develop. If you add any ability or success or interest in noticing the subtlety of your experience and noticing the detail of it and the profundity of it and the naked accessibility of it.
Yeah, part of it's just being here, being removed from normal life.
Mm-hmm.
Just seeing like sparkles and cement and sky kind of like doing its vibrating thing. I get lost in a I guess positive way, in the sort of the minutiae of just immediate experience, and the situations are kind of sort of pale. Like I'm having a thought about taxes at all.
Good.
Yeah.
But again, that's the point of a retreat like this, is you extricate it from your normal circumstances, so you get a chance to not have to wallow in that stuff, to not have to be seduced into your normal addictions and dealing with it, and fears and hopes and all that, and dealing with that stuff.
But added to that, this retreat is not about working on states or
Right.
So it's a whole different. It's more like basking rather than working on something,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a big relief.
Good.
asked me the question, is it all here, everything you needed? Intellectually, I'd probably say yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what's really helping being here is through your teachings, it's really all here.
Mm-hmm.
There's nowhere else to go. It's just right here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been really helpful.
Good.
So it's more than intellectual. Now it's starting to feel.
So you're feeling that, you're exploring that?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, intellectual is almost nothing. So this is all about feeling the actuality of the ways that this is, the ways that you are, and feeling them in fresh ways relative to our normal ways of feeling them, which tend to be more or less ossified around what we're used to holding them to be, and so on and so forth, our usual pattern and so on. Yeah, so that's great.
I notice, Peter, that I'm very easily satisfied. Like, I just need a little radiance. And it's like, okay, that's enough. That's good for today.
Yeah.
Rather than, this sort of driven, wanting to, like, look more and more deeply.
Good.
But
Very good.
Maybe that's okay.
That's totally okay. It's more than okay. That's good. So you're getting that, though, but you're actually noticing, you're sensing the radiance directly.
Totally.
Good.
I always do.
Yeah, good.
The difference between, arriving last night when I went to bed, I was just completely whooped, feeling like I don't think I can do this.
Yeah, sure.
And then, today I'm like fine.
Yeah, good.
So
Yeah.
that's sort of reassuring. It's sort of self-affirming in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you bring up a point that we touched on earlier, which is the sufficiency of just however this happens to be. In this approach, initially we really work at letting go. We really work at being with the radiance. And that's sort of the first half. That's sort of the introductory phase or the beginning phase. And the second phase is letting go of that, letting go of needing to let go, letting go of needing to notice, letting go of anything. Just that whatever is, being how it is absolutely sufficient, is absolutely complete. It does not require any further application, doesn't require any effort. And it's a subtle point because to get to notice the radiance, typically we have been, at least posturing ourselves as being somewhat effortful or noticing or applying ourselves in some degree, right? And so sort of switching gears and doing exactly the opposite, and just letting go of that is really a key point. It's a high watermark. It's like, hey.
No, because my intellectual voice is sort of, still pressing forward, saying, you should be noticing more.
Sure.
And so that's helpful to know that, that's sort of, the way of practice.
Yeah. And it's the nature of the mind to constantly be spewing all of this, superego and bossing ourselves around and self-criticism and you should be doing this. And that happens unceasingly, but it's just mind. It's not particularly important, and it's just a relatively small event in the vast field of your actual present experience.
Yeah, well, it helps just to know that I should just not even pay any attention to that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
On my way walking into here, the light was explosive. Just incredible.
Yeah, I thought that too. Walking across the parking lot I felt like, go into the light. The big spotlight shining right down there.
Oh, this afternoon, I don't know what it is when I walk into the desert area.
Mm-hmm.
And not only, normally I just see this fresh looking, it's just, wow,
Mm-hmm.
so refreshed,
Mm-hmm.
But today, it was several times I noticed something quieter. You know, it's just this scene, and then the sense of I don't know what to say. It was maybe saying the white paper things.
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and again, you know, as we become more mature, as we get more skillful at this approach of being with this, we fixate less on the spectacular showing of it, the spectacular proof of it, the spectacular wow, and we just settle into just what it is, and it doesn't need to be special. It doesn't need to be spectacular. It doesn't need to be showy. It doesn't need to prove itself. And yet it does, but it does so intrinsically rather than demonstratively. And we develop a sense of certainty that is the case. We don't need to demand it to prove itself. We don't need to demand it to show itself, because we get it. You get it. You get to a certain point where I get it. I get what this is. And at that point, you can let go. It's like, okay, cool. That's what it is. It's what it is. But, you know, you don't need to. You know, it doesn't need to prove it anymore. You know, just kind of I get it. I get it. I really see what this is, and hey, it is that. It is. It's that inalienably. It's not delicate. It's not like it's that, but it's precarious, and you have to sort of preserve it, or it's going to go away. It's not like that. What this is, it is absolutely inviolably, absolutely in a bulletproof way. It cannot not be that. And that's really what this is all about. It's the intrinsic nature of what this actuality is that turns out to be the payoff, that turns out to be the goal, that turns out to be the good stuff. So it's not anything you need to achieve or do, or some kind of superior functionality or skill you need to muster or create or discover. It's so much simpler than that. It's just noticing, discovering what this actually turns out to be, and always has been, always will be. It can't not be that. And that turns out to be the payoff. That. So it's so simple. It's just so easy, because it doesn't need to be done. It doesn't need to be made. It doesn't need to be produced. It already is that way. It just happens to be. It's the luck of the draw. You know, you really lucked out. You were born into a universe where actuality happened to be supremely transcendental, and you were that. You know, lucky you. It just happens to be the case that is the objective fact. And so the only thing that you need to do, and you don't even need to do it, but what you can do is just notice that that's the case. And it's undeniably the case. It's unalterably the case. It can't not be that. You can't make it not that. You can't make this dull or partial, or, you know, you can pretend to, but it doesn't work. You can't actually do it.
One of the things I feel is the byproduct of that vantage, especially in this setting, but even not that, is that I find it impossible to drum up a story. It becomes very difficult to drum up a story about it.
Yeah, oh yeah. And yet stories happen, the mind spins off, and there's all this, but none of it sticks. It's just, okay, yeah, there's that, but then this is just this fullness, this richness. And
so if I have maybe I should be noticing more, like it refreshes into something else, and it's gone. It doesn't have the potency anymore.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Because again, what happens is we build up confidence, we build up certainty that this is actually like that. You know, with enough exploration, you know, the exploration is basically an ongoing searching for proof. You're inviting proof. Okay, show me what you are. Show me the money. You know, show me what you got. Prove it to me. You know, and it does again and again and again. And at first we're like, oh wow, that's great. Okay, show me again, and it does. And so this continues, but after a while we get it. It's like, this is that. Yeah, this is that. You don't need to show off. You don't need to, prove it. You don't need to be spectacular. I get it. This is that, and it just, we just settle into a certainty that that is the case. That's what this happens to be. That's what you happen to be, and hurrah, But it's invulnerable. It doesn't need to be supported or shored up or proved or protected or anything like that. It's just it couldn't not be that. It can't not be what it is. It can't happen. It couldn't happen.
And in fact, the feeling is that how much work it would take to muster up.
Yeah, and you couldn't do it, and it wouldn't work. You'd bust your ass and it wouldn't actually get anywhere. It wouldn't actually do anything. You can't change this. You can't change what this is. You can pretend to, and we all have a lifetime experience of that to various degrees. But, spin doctoring at the end of the day is just spin doctoring. It doesn't actually change anything. It doesn't change what this is. It doesn't change what you are. That's the startling and awesome power of this is it's intrinsic. It's what this is. It's, what this is. And it is what it is. And the whole process is so simple. Just check it out. Look and see what it is. It's not hidden. It's not concealed. It's right here. Just look at. So here's this. It's actual. It's accessible. It was right here, not blocked. So what is this? What is this actuality? And it will show you what it is. You'll discover what it is. And when you discover what it is, that'll turn out to be your lucky day. Just by good fortune. I mean, hallelujah, that it happens to be like that what this is happens to be. It could be different. This could be the sort of the finite, materialist hell that consensus reality supposes it is. Where your life sucks and then you die, and then it still sucks. It could be. Suppose it was actually like that. I mean, wouldn't that be horrible? The only recourse would be this sort of elaborate pretenses and spiritual fantasies and stuff that people think is essential because in their core they believe that that's the case. They dread that that's actually objectively true. So they think their only recourse is to spin doctor themselves into some kind of imaginary heaven. How fortunate, how supremely fortunate that that's not the case. How supremely fortunate that this intrinsically is what it is. That it intrinsically is infinite. Is miraculous, is transcendental. And all of this is about taking advantage of that fact. So, it's just, you're off the hook. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to achieve anything. You don't have to muster up any skills even. All you got to do is look and see what this is. And you're always already looking and seeing what it is, because experience is that. Experience consists of nothing but this looking at itself, seeing what it is. So this is already in full effect. So just get in sync with that, which is already the case, and take advantage of it. It's so simple, so fortunate, so wonderfully fortunate. Yeah.
So I'm somewhat saying ditto to a lot of what's being said. The amazing thing is this feeling, well, who gives a fuck? But not even, it's just, it isn't even that much. It's just different. It's just support. It's just there.
Yeah.
And it sparkles or it doesn't sparkle, or it's this or that. And the little tweaks go, you're not trying, but yeah, you are, and all of that is just little, no bigger than any of those little those little pieces of sand.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And it's a gift to have this experience.
Yes, it is. It's wonderful.
I mean, it's really wonderful.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay. So, I don't. Well.
And that's it. Just rest in that wonderfulness.
Yeah.
As you inevitably do. Where else are you going to go? And because you have had the fortune to notice this, you get to enjoy it. You get to sit back and giggle and go, "Isn't this cool?"
Even at times, taking some emotional, Fritz mentioned a nosedive,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, that's so what?
Yeah,
It has nothing to do with it being wonderful.
right. Because that's just a symptom of its intrinsic process. Its intrinsic process, so to speak, not that it is a process, but to the extent it might be called a process, its intrinsic process is to do what it does and look the way it looks, which can be emotional stuff. It can be weird, circumstantial stuff. It can be anything. But nonetheless, it doesn't ever depart from itself. And all of these modes that it apparently goes through and what it seems to be presenting as is its nature, is its demonstration of what it is, so is ultimately the payoff, even when it seems to be superficially, having negative aspects or challenging aspects at the time or whatever. Yeah.
I'm finding that the experience of fulfilled with this bubble.
Mm-hmm.
There's always spiritual pronouncements like "You are the world,"
Mm-hmm.
and it's like some big exalted achievement state. And when I feel, I mean it's naturally that. It's
Yeah.
naturally that. And I feel more like it feels like I'm a stupid, in a good way, stoned little child.
Sure.
A little
Yeah.
kid. I just like,
Yeah, because you don't need to be special for that to be the case. You don't need to be special or functional or an amazing person to happen to be the totality of reality. That's the amazing thing. You don't need to earn it. You don't need to justify it. It just happens to be the case that you are. Yeah, and this is, all of these, I shouldn't say all, but let's just say the lion's share of all of these absurdly exalted spiritual pronouncements, thou art that, you are the world, you are the light of creation. They're all literally true. They're all actually literally true. And they're not literally true as something you can achieve as a possibility. They're literally true in the sense that it's already the case. And it's not even the case in a special way. It just happens to be, that's how it is. Yeah, and it's surprising. Remember that the quote from supposedly Jesus, it was on that little sheet we went over last night. You seek until you find. When you find, you'll be troubled. You go, boy, this is too much. And then after you're troubled, you will be amazed and you will be the ruler of everything. Because you discover you already are. And that's amazing. It happens to be the case is really amazing.
And who cares?
Yeah, and it's no big deal. It's just normalcy. It's what it always has been. Same old, same old. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, but it just happens to be the case. any degree that you can notice this, even a very small degree. If you weren't wholehearted jumping into, I'm everything, in that deep end, if that seems a little, gosh, that sounds great, but where do I sign up, kind of thing. Doesn't matter. Any sense, any degree whatsoever that you can just begin to sense that, wow, this field of experience is really kind of trippy. It's not what it's been billed as. It's not what I've been told it is. Any degree whatsoever that you can flirt with that you can play with that, is enormously advantageous. And ultimately, it will show you what it is, and you will see all these amazing, insane-sounding, exalted, ridiculous statements, and you'll see that actually that's pretty true. Actually, that's pretty much how it is.
It's a funny thing because you kind of start at noon or whatever on your way around, and at the beginning it feels like any of those exalted things would be audacious and pretentious and crazy. And then you get somewhere past 6 o'clock or something, and you feel like actually the opposite would be. What feels audacious would be to imagine that I'm somehow separate from all of this or whatever. It flips itself on its head.
This condition is what it is, and it can be seen in so many ways. And none of the seeings are accurate. None of the seeings capture what it actually is, because it is intrinsically transcendental in the sense that it transcends analysis, it transcends deconstruction, it transcends process, it transcends description. It is impossible to definitively define what this is, what's happening here. It's absolutely impossible. It cannot be done. Not as a failure of our skill of defining, but because what this is such an event that is not doable. It's not the category of condition that is definable.
Right.
And that just happens to be the case. And so we can have all these amazing insights, of, I see, it looks like this, it looks like that. And they're all valuable, but none of them is definitive. None of them is the truth. None of them is, that's how it is. This is an openness. It's an open-endedness that can look like anything, but is always more than it seems to be. Always. No matter how grandiose it seems to be, it's more than that. Or you could say less than that.
And already what it was before I even had the thought to describe what it may be.
Yeah, and it already is that, exactly, yeah. Because it's intrinsic. It's not something that you make it into through some spiritual process.
Right.
This is just simply sitting back and stop bullshitting yourself and noticing, wow, this is, I thought I knew what this was, but if I look really closely, it's kind of more slippery than that, isn't it? And in that slipperiness is our great, it's a wonderful gift, the wonderful grace is, oh wow, this is too slippery to be what I thought it was. So then you're free of the horror of it actually being what you thought it was. That limitation of, oh my God. If it's a really good one, I would. You be the judge. You can censor it.
Censor it.
You can be the hard ass.
I will be the hard ass.
It's interesting because, there's the whole Christian, being saved model.
Mm-hmm.
It is in fact sort of true.
Yeah. In a funny way, it almost is.
It is. It's sort of like sounding a bit like a prayer meeting tonight.
Hallelujah. I'm here to tell you, brothers and sisters, the Lord is at hand.
It isn't what you think it is.
You do that too well.
Scary, isn't it?
It is very scary. Don't you try that.
Don't try this at home. These people are professionals.
But it's a soft hallelujah.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Because it's intrinsic. It actually is that.
But it really is hallelujah.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, that's the bravado of the, the sort of the tent revival show enthusiasm. It's a kind of a self-fulfilling, you're generating the enthusiasm, so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh yes, this is wonderful, this is holy. But that's actually in the face of the fear that it isn't. Oh, I have to generate this because it's not here. But the strength of this, the advantage of this, is it's based on what this is. So it actually is it. The money's in the bank. Your check is not going to bounce. The money is in the bank. So this actually is what it is. And so, yeah, hallelujah. Cool. But you don't need to trump it up. You don't need to inflate it. You don't need to make it special.
Go out and say that he souls.
Because we're all saved.
Yeah, it's just a matter, and you're free to notice that that's actually the case. And if you don't notice that's the case, you don't lose anything because it is the case. But it is possible to notice it, so if you have the proclivity to do so, you can take advantage of that fact, and then you get to sit back and chuckle.
So, as I've been sort of unfolding, I realize, yes, I've always been with this, or I think some places say, like resting, you're resting. But there's a little qualitative difference between now being with this and what I imagine it must have been like, or as it always has been. I mean, I know this is not a time,
Right.
Time.
Well, it's not a time thing, but it's not a time thing either. I mean, time is as much time as it ever was.
Right. But I have two distinct memories or feelings. One, this has always been here.
Yeah, sure.
And I've always been with it.
Yeah.
And the other is, even in like a busy life and everything now, with all my noticing, it's getting easier and easier just to sort of stay
Yeah.
more permanent.
Yeah. And this is the paradox of spirituality, is that you are coming to see what has always been the case. So it has always been the case, and yet you progressively come to see it, come to recognize it. So your recognition develops, but what you're recognizing doesn't. So it's always this kind of double value.
Peter?
Yes.
Won't you speak to us about Revelation?
Sure. Revelation is, I sometimes say there's two phases to this process. One is revelation and one is integration. And integration. Revelation and integration. So that revelation is any degree of presentation that, wow, this is more than I've recognized. Any degree of that is essentially revelation. And the integration is the repercussions of revelation. So revelation happens, you get a hit of, wow, there's something really interesting going on here, there's something really strange going on here. And then because that experience is experiential. It's not just a concept. You're not just playing with philosophy. It's like, wow, wait a minute, it hits you. And since it hits you, it impacts you. Like you hit a tuning fork and the tuning fork starts to vibrate. And the vibrate works itself out and then straightens itself out and eventually dies out. And similarly, our whole orientation to ourselves and our experience, as a result of these impacts, reorients itself, which can seem to take place as a process over time. So revelation is of the essence of this discovery, because without revelation, you're not in contact with actuality, or you're not being impacted by actuality in an efficient way. Of course, it is very paradoxical, because you're always being impacted by actuality, because what else are you in touch with? And yet, when what I'm calling this yoga, when you engage, let's say intentionally, or intelligently is better than intentionally, when you engage with this actuality more intelligently and really begin to sort of prime the pump of noticing what it is, noticing how astounding it is, and especially noticing how it transcends your previous expectations and definitions of what it is, that's when this impact can become very efficient, and it's more forceful, and it reorients or restructures your intrinsic, the way you hold yourself within your experience and with relation to your experience. What your experience seems to be, in short.
Does it do the work?
Yes. It does the work. Because it's doing everything. What is seeing your experience in the first place is it. You're not seeing anything. I mean, what sees through your eyes? What's seeing your experience now? You can't say. Go looking for it. You're not going to find anything. It's a miracle. I mean, what's seeing your experience? It's just a miraculous potency. You can say, my experience is being seen, self-evidently, whatever that means, right? And what's doing that? I don't know. I'm not doing it. I mean, I can feel like I'm doing it, but that's a pretty thin facade that just doesn't stand up to much investigation. If I look at what's looking at my experience, all I can say is there's just this very strange, miraculous potency, functionality of experiencing that seems to be always present. It's obviously doing itself. What's being experienced, likewise, seems to be always present, is doing itself. I'm not putting all these colors and shapes and lights and sounds and stuff here. They're just here, right? I'm not putting them here. How are they showing up? So, yeah, it's doing it all. And it can be with itself more immaturely, more dully, more say, ignorantly, as we all know. It can misunderstand itself very profoundly and get caught up in what we all have a very intimate experience of, human life and human misunderstanding and thinking we have a handle on things and so on and so forth. And yet it can also, and unanalyzably, how does this happen? Who knows? But it can also suddenly, maybe not so suddenly, but anyway, it can get more mature and more intelligent in its engagement with itself and begin to really look and really notice, what's actually here. And that's when this process of revelation and impact kicks into high gear and gets more efficient. It's always going on. Even in ignorant life, even in relatively immature life, it's still a process of intrinsic self-refinement. But it's much more drawn out and less efficient, arguably.
And I do believe there have been times when I've had revelation that I didn't even recognize it was.
Everyone's having revelation all the time.
Yeah.
That's what this is. This is revelation. In fact, experience is revelation. And when you notice that, then it's an explicit revelation. Experience always impacts you. Experiencing itself is a self-correcting system. On an ongoing basis, it is impacting you and changing you. It's like a feedback network. It's always feeding back on you. You experience, and what you experience impacts you, which shifts subtly or grossly the way that you experience, and then that impacts you, and so on. And this happens always in every context, even with a more immature mode of experiencing, when you're just sort of clueless, your basic normal schmo, or when you begin to become more artful and more intelligently engaged, like we advocate here, then it's still the same thing, and perhaps gets more efficient, or perhaps just becomes more nakedly obvious. Who knows? Can't sort it out. I mean, the whole thing, everything that I'm saying about it is untrue, is inaccurate, because what this actually is and how it actually works cannot be said. So everything I say is an approximation and a euphemism and a.
Peter, what's that rule over all part of it? I mean, I sort of see it's doing me, it's doing this, it's doing everything.
Well, you notice that what's doing everything is what you are.
Yeah.
And not as an assuming some position or other. It just happens to be the case that what you are, when you go looking for yourself, you don't actually find anything other than this,
Right.
and this does everything. So you are this. You are that. So you rule over all. I mean, it's a poetic, grandiose way of putting it.
Right.
But Christ
Discover
would.
what's doing it all.
Yeah, exactly. You discover that you can't find a you other than this,
Right.
and this is doing itself. So by default, you are this that is doing itself.
So there's a sense of self that's separate and it's unsatisfactory, and then maybe there's these surprises by joy, to quote that phrase. But I'm thinking of stepping onto that rock. You were talking about sort of stages in Dzogchen, and like you step on the rock in the stream, and first you dip it in, and is this going to hold me? Is this safe? Blah, blah, blah. And then you step on the rock maybe, and then it's like, I'm not sure how this phrase goes, but amazing, wondrous action, amazing power, chop wood, carry water. So just the most mundane, in quotes, activities just take on a wondrousness, and then that fragile sense of self, evaporates, and it's sort of transferred into this a security of this mystery.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
And then as you stabilize in that, then that's the third step, perhaps.
Yeah, because the sense of a separate self, a sense of a limited self, is based on fact. This feels like me. This feels like myself, and it is. This is me. This is myself. But to be more accurate and look at that very carefully, I notice, can I find anything that's not myself? And that's where sloppy thinking or misidentification can muddy up the works, because in the sort of the small self delusion that it's so easy to identify with, it's self-evident that this is me, feels like me, it's me, here I am, no duh. But then the wall over there, oh no, that's not me. Well, is that really true? Look into that. This me that is here, how is it here? Is it here in any different way than this wall that is here? Is anything different doing it? Is it made of any different substance? And so on and so forth. So again, through this kind of investigation, these sort of knee-jerk oversimplifications and inaccurate interpretations are disproved. And I discovered, this feels like me as much as it ever did, but there's nothing that is excluded from that. So, this is me. But this is me. And when you see that that is just actually the case, then all of these poetic references to it make sense. Sure.
the rule overall, it seems more like, rather than ruling, it's more like everything's completely out of control and unpredictable.
Yeah.
As opposed to ruling.
Out of control and unpredictable, and you're doing it. You slob. Get your act together. Do something about the geopolitical scene, would you? You're kind of dropping the ball on that one.
How about the environment?
I mean, there's all these ways of putting it, and they're all heavy-handed, and they're all inaccurate. I mean, because we're human beings and we're so addicted to dealing with semantic systems and dealing with each other in terms of semantic systems, it's very useful to really bear in mind as a forefront principle that this actuality cannot be accurately expressed in symbols, period. The only way to accurately express this is this itself. And this is not a symbol. This is actual. So all these things that are said about it are, you already know, on the basis of that principle, wrong, inaccurate. Nope, it's not that. These ways of putting it may have value, may have evocative strengths and all that, but they're not accurate. It's not actually like that. And a miss is as good as a mile. So, it's really important to integrate with that principle. I mean, just have whether or not you sort of maintain it as an aphorism or something, or just have the intuition of it, but just to really, just one way or another, remember that this is transcendental. This intrinsically eludes description. It is more and other than can be said. So then there's all these ways of saying it. No, so it's like this, it's like that, it's like this, it's like that. It's like, yeah, okay. Those are useful, evocative statements, but they're not true. They're not accurate. And that's an important distinction. Especially when you get into all these spiritual teachings and so on, where there can be very pithy things that can be said that are really valuable and useful, but they're not true. And that's it's an important distinction. It's not actually like that.
As far as just for my own contemplation, maybe as far as ruling over the all, we were discussing the ox-herding pictures, and in the last one there's a commentary. Without exerting any supernatural powers, the trees bloom by themselves. So that, to me, there's probably a key there to ruling over the all.
Sure.
It's an intriguing statement. I don't understand it, but maybe I will.
Well, it's the same thing. It's exactly the same. It's a different way of saying the same thing. Everything happens, and that fact is identical with the fact of your being, and the fact of this being. So you are, this is, and everything happens. And those three statements are synonyms. So then you get into all these elaborations like the quote from Christ and so on, but don't split hairs in terms of trying to pin it down, because that's obviously a waste of time. It's just
it's a pointer.
It's just exactly. It's a pointer to something that is beyond it.
Yeah, the finger pointing at the moon.
Yeah. Go to the moon.
All that matters is the moon.
Yeah, go to the moon. Fingers are fun, but go to the moon.
So I could say, I am everything happening.
Sure. That's a pretty, for as inaccurate statements go, that's pretty darn accurate. Yeah. a lot of ways to put that. You are the full field of your experience, which happens to contain the entire universe. And the way that that field is being done is the way you are being done. And since you are that field and that field is doing itself, then you are, by default, what is doing all of that, which happens to include the universe. But again, all of that is sort of splitting hairs and getting too precise about something that is just a simple, actual condition that is. This condition actually is, and it is the way it is, and you're it, everything's it, and so on and so forth. I mean, as human beings, since using semantic systems is so intrinsically a part of the way we relate, it's really important to remember that these things, there's no point getting caught up in these things, and with regard to reference to this actuality, because the actuality cannot be addressed within that context. Well, it's obviously a lot more paradoxical than that. It can be addressed, but it cannot be contained or captured. And language is very paradoxical because language is partial and actuality is not partial. And yet, language consists of nothing other than actuality, and actuality is doing language. So even though language is partial, it's actually infinite. So it gets very slippery to try to pin that down. But you can't pin it down because we've already established you can't pin down actuality, and since language is actuality, you can't pin it down. So even though language is limited, you can do the unlimited with it. And that makes absolutely no sense. But you can't make it make sense by trying to sort it out or figure it out.
It's amazing how you can say all that.
Just stringing words together.
Rolls off your tongue. I can barely keep up with it.
Unfortunately, it doesn't keep up with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't go anywhere. Some of you who've just arrived, obviously you plop down in the middle of things, but tomorrow we will start the day with a meditation which will be, quite very experiential with regard to this kind of a thing, which is obviously a lot of talking, and so you should be sucked into things a little more engagedly or a little more thoroughly by lunchtime, with any luck.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Lunch will be really good regardless.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've all been, engaged in a certain rather intense engagement for the last day, and so we're kind of in a certain mode that has been established and built up, let's say, and so never fear.
We listened to the Tao Poo on the way down, so we might be right there with you.
Good, yeah. Good preparation. Well done.
So continuing on the subject of words. So words are totally irrelevant, but sometimes useful.
Words are totally irrelevant, always wrong, sometimes useful, and Words are radiant presence because there's nothing else, and radiant presence is transcendental inclusiveness of hyper-intelligent fractal meaningfulness. So words are that. So you got it. So you kind of get it from both ends, so to speak.
There's something heartwarming about that.
We talked, actually, just to sort of spin back on something that Fritz brought up about how you sort of had a nosedive, and we were talking about revelation and integration. The very nature of this process is surprising turns. So that anything happens as a result of this engagement is a win. And what you can't assess what's happening by what it seems to be at first blush. So in other words, any degree of impact, of impactfulness, when symptoms of which show up as changes of energy, can be subjective, can be objective. I mean, there can be, signs of effectiveness in this yoga can be anything. It can be emotional, can be positive, can be negative, can be health problems, can be psychological problems, can be psychological solutions, can be weird karmic. You can have weird synchronistic things showing up in the world around you as a symptom of your process. I mean, there's no holds barred as to what this can look like. And all of these symptoms, of these signs, are a plus. It means that yes, this process is working, but you can't assess it or judge it on the basis of what it seems to be at the time. Yeah, at any given moment. Any given moment. So never. But that it is happening is the good news. So I mean, in other words, you're in the thick of it if you're having these kinds of symptoms, which means that you are practicing the yoga. So that's the good news.
About the miracle for a minute.
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you're with the radiance, seems like that's enough.
It's more than enough.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah. The only advantage of listening to these words is to sort of immunize yourself to the fact of being able to listen to all this bullshit and see that it is radiance.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's radiance too, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny how my mind goes, I understand that. And,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You think you're going to climb up into the inherent intelligence? What?
Yeah. No, it's all about seeing the radiance, feel the radiance. It's all about that. Nothing else. Of course, there's nothing but radiance, so there's no holds barred. So you can talk, you can, exercise, you can fight. It doesn't matter what you do, it's the radiance. So it's no holds barred. So having said it's all about feeling the radiance, you haven't really said anything because that's inclusive. There ain't no non-radiance that you need to avoid.
Well, and in that sense, there's something about saying the count-onableness of the radiance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Of like just being in different experiences.
Yeah.
I was saying that.
Yeah.
Just.
No, that's the whole point of this. It's this too. You can be in all sorts of different arenas or different modes of engagement, and you go, oh, wow, yeah, this too. So you can sit and be very intellectual and analytical, or you can be very sort of just textual, experiential, or anything. And yeah, this too, because there's no not this. There's nothing that is not real. There's nothing that's not actual. If it's being experienced, then that means it's actual. It's actual experience. And experience is intrinsically transcendental radiance. That's what it's made of. I mean, it's not, radiance is an evocative metaphor. It's not really radiance. What it is, well, I can't say. But it's real. But obviously we're referring to it as radiance because it's meaningful to do so.
Yeah, because I noticed that I continually look for the loophole. Look for the one area in which this doesn't happen.
Good, but that's good. So because you're testing yourself, which is the way the fine tuning is the final polishing. It's like going down a checklist. It's like, well, I found the radiance all these places, but gosh, is it over there too? Yep, sure is. You can check it off your list, and then you go on to the next thing. Until you've got a list that's just checked off.
But there's sort of a point at which it's a matter of just like wiping everything off the list.
Yeah. You discover there is no list. Yeah, there's no list. It's just radiance. Yeah, you do that enough, you get it. It's like you get through your thick head. Oh, well, I've looked here and I've looked there and I've looked here and it's always radiance. So it's like, duh. So if I look over there, is it going to be radiance? What do you think?
Banging your head against the wall,
Yeah.
Right, if I lean up here, then maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's a kind of a refinement of proving it. We find this, we get this, we have this revelation of what this is, and it verifies itself and proves it. We go, wow, that's amazing. And we go, gosh, if I look again, is it still going to be the same? And we look at, yep, proves itself again. And like, yeah, but how about over here? But I can see it here, but how about over here? And you look at that, yep. And but what? It couldn't be there. Yep. And eventually you get to a point, well, oh, okay, I get it. You become established in self-verifying certainty that experience is what it is. Any experience, all experience. And then it can't not be that. You can't make it not that if you wanted to. And you get to a certain point where I don't need it to prove itself anymore. I get it. You know, this is a no-brainer. Yeah, okay, this is the way it is. Okay, cool. And then you just let go of it. You just go about your business, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I remember, you know, the reason I brought up the save thing is, you know, that from my childhood, people were trying to save me. And then at some point in my 20s, I met someone on the streets of Sydney who said, would you like to be saved? And I said, oh, okay.
Sure.
Good idea.
Yeah.
And there really was like this change of experience.
Sure.
And it was like, oh, well, that's out of the way. I don't have to worry about that anymore.
Check it off your list. Thank God I've been saved. Okay. What's on TV?
It's easy to forget that, like, confusion is a major motive.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So interesting because you go light and
Yeah. Yeah. Sloppiness is radiance. Incompetence is radiance. Dysfunctionality is radiance. Stupidity is radiance. Forgetfulness is radiance. Being a damaged, neurotic personality, scarred, pathetic excuse for a human being is radiance.
We're covered.
Yeah. Thank goodness. Thank goodness, or we'd all be in trouble. Especially Stan. I mean, no, it's just reaching over there and whacking you.
Zen stick.
You're just such a perfect straight man.
So, sort of what Leif touched on, as or anyway, you probably shouldn't say names for the computers, but anyway.
HIPAA regulations.
What? Oh, anyway, so this is the first time I've ever experienced you as radiance wording. And I'm just watching these words just come out of you like.
Where do they come from?
Well, where do they come
Where
from?
do they come from?
Yes.
Where do your words come from? Where do they come from? Where were they before they showed up? What put them there? Look and see, really. I mean, look and see. By what force did these words get said? Where's it come from? What's doing that? The words get said by the same force that the light shines from these light bulbs, by the same force that gravity pulls everything down towards the floor. What is that? What's doing that?
It's a soft hallelujah.
So I sort of checked in a little while ago on the subject of specialness.
Mm-hmm.
And while a lot of words were happening, and it just specialness is not separate from radiance, and I am special in exactly the same way that electric cord over there is special.
Exactly.
Or the sound of the heater is special.
Yeah.
Or anything that is noticed by the noticing is special.
Yeah. Exactly.
By virtue of its radiance.
Yeah. Actuality is Supreme specialness.
And
Normalcy is supreme specialness, and the problem with specialness is it's defined in terms of some imagined non-specialness.
Yeah. And I hadn't really understood before what you were reading us last night in the intrinsic meaningfulness.
Yeah.
That when I would get to that part, I just couldn't quite.
Sure.
But somehow there's some understanding of that in a sense of that everything's special. That's the same as the intrinsic meaningfulness.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, because it's the embodiment of inconceivable transcendental intelligence.
Yeah.
Of inconceivable transcendental purposefulness, call it, or divinity, or sacredness. I mean, you can start spinning off all these imputed qualities. But nonetheless, it is that.
Yeah, and you can't find anything that isn't that.
Yeah, that's what we got here.
It's also like the specialness and the normalcy cancel themselves out.
Yeah.
They both disappear in a
Yeah.
puff because absolute normalcy is specialness, as we're saying.
Yeah. It turns out that those categories are just irrelevant.
Yeah.
Every category is irrelevant. Specialness is irrelevant as a category. Unspecialness is irrelevant as a category. Because the only actual category that's relevant is this, and it's beyond categories.
Okay.
So we throw all these categorizations at it, but none of them capture it. None of them hold it. None of them are true. So, this is beyond categorizing. And so you can't say what it is.
And yet there it is.
Yeah, it's real. It's actual. It's concrete. It's the only concrete that there is.
I also got this image of standing on the North Pole and trying to describe the North Pole, you'd have to take a step south and point back and talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you've done that, you're not on the North
Yeah.
Pole.
Exactly. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But you can still stand on the North Pole and go and take a step and start to talk
Sure.
anyway.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, that's the fascinating thing about this. Even if you were wildly missing it, you haven't departed from it. And the missing it is it too. So it's just endlessly trippy. It's endlessly strange. Deviating from it is it.
Right.
And deviating from it doesn't actually depart from it.
Right.
So it's just, what are you going to do?
That's where I have that in terms of sort of trustiness. Is that when I like this morning when I woke up, it's like I forget all this stuff. I forget everything. It's
Sure.
like got to start from scratch. Even though in general I'm kind of more sensitive.
Yeah.
But it's just weird how the default mode seems to be one of confusion or.
Yeah. But that's not, but again, the point isn't to remember this or to retain it or to wrap yourself up to a certain point of recognition that you can sort of stay at.
Right.
The point is that engaging with this transforms you intrinsically. And then you will still go through these various modes that you go through. You'll go through modes of forgetfulness and modes of ignorance and modes of confusion and all this. But you'll be doing it in a different mode than you would have previously before you had been impacted with this engagement. So it's not important to retain it explicitly or consciously. It's the thing is just to go through the process, and it transforms you into what you have always been, paradoxically. It doesn't need to look at it a particular way. It doesn't need to look functional. It doesn't need to look, like anything, like you retain any of it, or you can spit it out, or any of that stuff. It just doesn't matter. It's about letting go. It's not about building up something that you can cling to. It's about just let go. Forget it. Fuck it. The supreme mantra. Fuck it.
Yeah, I sometimes, once I kind of wake up, I sort of get there in terms of like, no, fuck it.
Sure.
I should have like fuck it written right over the bed, so when I wake up, fuck it. It'd be really good one. I think I'll do that.
You can really annoy people and have it tattooed on your forehead. Well, people might take it the wrong way.
No, you have to do it backwards, so when you look at the mirror.
Don't ask for permission. You're opening a can of worms there. I can just imagine.
Okay, so we've got saved, we've got hallelujah, and now let's put prayer. It's all prayer.
Sure. Yeah.
Everything.
Sure. Yeah. It's prayer in the sense that it is a celebration of what it is. Everything that this is an explication of what it is intrinsically. And what it is intrinsically happens to be supremely sacred.
Yes.
So it's a sacrament, if you look at it from that point of view.
Well said.
Having communion tomorrow.
Yes, I think, well, gosh. Oh. I feel like we're having communion right now.
Yeah.
So what is history?
Oh.
Well, you can't say, can you? History is many, many things, and you can't pin it down to exactly what it is, right? I mean, part of what history is an elaborate mental construction that we have in real time. So, we remember the past, and we remember, what we did and what supposedly happened in the world and all these various things, all of which is actually happening now, of course. You can't remember anything at any other time than in the present. So history is an activity of mind. History may be history. What is history? It also gets into the question of what is time. How does event function in time? And time is a very strange, slippery thing, because when you go looking for it, you can't pin it down. You can't isolate it. There's clearly only the present. Actuality is only actual now, always. There's always now. It's never not now. It's never then. And yet, this nowness is not static. It has it's obviously has a very strange dynamism. And if you try and look at that very precisely to pin down exactly what that is and how it works, it'll slip through your fingers like butter. You can't actually pin it down. You can't actually be precise with it. So, in what sense did something ever happen? Well, you can't say. It's very weird and trippy, right? Because the only happening you can find is now, is in is, not in was. You can't find was except in is. It was is an assertion that happens in is, right? And yet, we all remember other things that happened. So, and you look and you try and say, okay, so let me pin that down. Let me see exactly how that works. Good luck. It's very elusive. It's very strange to try to get to the bottom of what any of that is.
If I see a tree,
Mm-hmm.
the reality, the actuality of the tree,
Mm-hmm.
I'm also very aware of the actuality of the little tree before it was the big tree.
Right. Which is only an actuality as opposed to a thought, to the extent that the little tree is actually embodied in the big tree, and the way in which that actually happens in terms of physics or biology or any of those things is inscrutable. We can't, again, you can't precisely say what the relationship is or how it works. So it's not that it's not that way, but it's just that exactly what that way is can't be pinned down. It can't be precisely found. And, if you examine it closely, it will certainly reveal itself to be more subtle and complicated than the simplistic sort of consensus reality notion of, there's the past and the present and the future, and the past is what happened, and the present is what's happening, and the future is what's going to happen, and they're all kind of the same. It's not really like that. It's stranger than that, because there's actually only now, and the relationship to what happened and what's going to happen to now is strange. It's not just a simplistic, what's going to happen is just like what's happening, only it hasn't happened yet. What does hasn't happened yet actually mean? Now, what does it mean? In reality, what does it mean? As opposed to just a notion. So, again, I use this word transcendental simply because it's a nice, convenient word that so nicely indicates the inability to precisely determine what something is. In other words, the event itself experientially reveals itself to be multidimensional and slippery and nonlinear in a way that's not amenable to precise analysis. And looking at time, looking at flow of events, looking at apparent causality and all these kinds of things, in my experience, is essentially transcendental in that sense. In other words, the actuality reveals itself to be more subtle than just a sort of a simplistic assumption that it's the way it's the way most people think of it, kind of thing. So, to back up, so what is history? You can't say. You can't say what it is. It's not nothing, but it's strange. And it's not just a simple mechanical sort of a progression in any simple sense, because this event here is not mechanical and not simple. So any precedence it has would not going to be mechanical or simple either, and the relationship of those to this is also going to be not mechanical and simple. Which is a very elaborate way of saying that the question isn't really answerable. But no question is answerable, ultimately, because actuality is not amenable to definition, to accurate description, to comprehensive description. You can't say what anything is. No one has ever said what anything is. You could get the top Nobel Prize winning physicists of all time in this room and ask them, okay, what is energy? And to a man, they would say, man and / woman, they would say, we don't know, we can't say. We can tell you a lot about it. We can tell you a lot about how it responds to measurement within certain parameters and so on. But what it is, we don't know. It's a mystery. It's essentially miraculous in the sense that it transcends analysis. It transcends being able to pin it down precisely. And, oh, yes, this is this. And ultimately, all actuality is in that category. It's certainly actual, but exactly what it is and exactly how it is elusive and subtle and multidimensional and nuanced and weird and strange. And again, you can study the hell out of it and say a lot about how it seems to interact with itself and so on and so forth. But when you get right down to it, but what is it? You just can't. The bottom, the last word has not been said. And I think intrinsically cannot be said, because I think that this the inability to say exactly what this is not just a failure of our analytical ability. I think it's intrinsically in what the quality of condition that this happens to actually be is something that is not amenable to. It's rather analogous to the question of, well, what is a dream? What's a dream? You have a dream. You have a dream. It's self-evident you're having a dream. But what is it? What is the dream? Well, it's a psychological projection as a result of neurotransmitters rearranging themselves as you sleep, and your body cleanses itself, and blah 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 blah. Right? Okay, great. What is it? Don't know, but it's pretty weird. So really, the essence of this whole investigation that we're all toying with here is really exploring the fact of inscrutability, the fact of elusiveness, or what I call transcendentality or something. That actuality is a real strange critter. It's a real strange condition, and that turns out to be good news. But it's startling news because as human beings we typically have arrogance and we think we kind of know what things are. And I think that investigation reveals that that is actually not really maintainable in the evidence.
Word suchness comes to mind, gratifying in some way too.
Sure.
For this suchness.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of references, in spirituality and science and poetry and so on, that capture some of the nuance of this. But of course, they don't define it. They don't really completely say what it is. Yes.
This qualifies to be on the topic of radiant presence.
Mm-hmm.
I've been studying the early Egyptians and the sacred sciences,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm kind of intrigued with how they, in interpreting what's going on here, they see numbers and symbols, and they kind of seem to be looking at this in this strange way that
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to sort of grok, feel out, and I know that's something that interests you.
Yeah.
With the tarot, and just speak to that paradigm.
Sure. Well, the Egyptians apparently had a very sophisticated system of archetypes and interrelationships between the archetypes. And they also seem to have a very mature understanding, a very sophisticated understanding that the realities that the archetypes referred to transcended the archetypes. In other words, they weren't simply animists who simply thought that, God, there was a God that had the head of a dog, and in any simple sense. On the contrary, they had a very sophisticated understanding that apparently that these symbols were evocative of certain characteristics of actuality that was transcendental, that was beyond analysis, and they seem to have erected this very elaborate system, or group of systems, or set of systems, or whatever, of exploring the interrelationships and all of this, and as a expedient of trying to communicate what this is. But again, my personal suspicion is that their approach was less scientific and more initiatory. They were more interested in using these systems as sort of metaphysical or parapsychological tools to induct sensitive individuals into being able to be with this actuality in a profound, transhuman way.
And so they were using harmonics, or
Well, all that they had it was a very elaborate, a very elaborate system, and I don't know enough of the details to go into detail, and it's not particularly important anyway. My opinion. I mean, if you're interested in it, of course, by all means, pursue it. But there's so many systems that are really, very brilliant, very evocative, very meaningful. Kabbalah is one, Tarot is one. Of course, Tarot is just a pictorial version of Kabbalah. Egyptian metaphysics, the various mystery metaphysics and mythologies of the traditional old civilizations and so on. The Mithraic mysteries and blah 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 blah, which again, most of which were essentially initiatory rather than scientific. So they were less concerned with explaining or elucidating what this is than with serving as a medium or a bridge for sensitive individuals to be able to rise or sink to a deeper engagement and mode of functioning within them.
you seem to have an understanding about sort of the structure of this, though, that they're, the repeating Fibonacci series and, just the...
Yeah, clearly they had, it's mind-boggling. You look at the mathematics and the pyramids and these kinds of things, it's like, what were they doing? These people were just throwing all this incredible analytical genius at what? Doing what, And again, it's their mindset is very alien to modern thinking, so it's hard to know what they were doing, the specifics of it. It's fascinating, for sure. But again, I suspect that it was fundamentally initiatory rather than analytic or scientific.
Peter, along that line, would you be willing to comment on incubation, which was an ancient Greek?
I don't know anything about that.
It was just that they lay down in the temple. They had just given up, and in order to self-actualize, they just gave up, laid down, and felt the body.
I never heard of that.
And went with gravity and had a sinking feeling.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like an interesting experiment. I never heard of that. That's interesting.
And Empedocles, do you know that name?
I know the name. I don't know much of the story. I mean, people have, the repertoire of people's experiments with this stuff is just mind-boggling. I mean, just some of the things we touched on, and just endless more systems, and many of them have astounding genius embodied in them. And a lot of them are just plain whacked. You try and figure which is which.
Yeah.
Which sort of in a way just goes to show how miraculous it is that we can just kind of reach through all of that and experience this.
Yeah, because what is able to do that is this itself. So it, of course, has all the functionalities that this has, which are intrinsically transcendental. I mean, what is the functionality that enables you to be experiencing your experience? Right? I can't answer that question. And yet it's manifestly actual. So you have, to the extent that it's you doing it or whatever, it's irrelevant. You intrinsically have, or you are, this inconceivable functionality. So you have the intrinsic ability to engage with all of this astounding field of quantum phenomena that presents as your sensory experience and all. You already have that. You just have that. You have that functionality. So it's not, because you have it, it's not surprising that you can exercise it. You know, if we're used to thinking of ourselves as, oh, we're just these limited human beings and we only know what we've been taught and we're all kind of stupid and we're, you know, blah, 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 blah. No, that's not true. It's just not true. You are a transcendental energy system. You are an outgrowth of matter itself, which is an outgrowth of reality itself. You know, you are a quantum physical, energetic, I don't know what, right? You are that. So of course you can and do exercise the intrinsic functionalities or behaviors of that you happen to be. So it's not at all surprising that we have abilities that are superior to what we might, or let's say at least beyond what we might anticipate if we define ourselves as these little separate human beings that can only do what we've been taught or figured out. I mean, that's really, you know, to reiterate, that's really the fundamental point of this whole thing, of this whole principle that is being played with here, is that what this intrinsically is what matters, is what the authority of it is what the power of it is. You know, this is what it is, and that fact is the important fact. It is what it is, it does what it does, and that fact explains all the phenomena that seem to be occurring. Because all the phenomena that seem to be occurring are simply the elaborations or the implications or the output of this fact, that this is the way it is, and you are this. So you are what you are, and as a result of you being what you are, your field of experience appears to itself, i.e. to you, which happens to contain the entire universe and everyone in it, to the extent that they show up in your experience. And that seems to be the sole actuality as far as you're concerned. And this isn't theory, it's just empirical observation, right? And it works the way it works because it is what it is, and you can't even catalog the way it works. You can't even say what it's doing, and so you can't say how it's doing it is no surprise. And yet, what it's doing and how it's doing it is a function of what it is, and it is what it is. That's already a done deal. It already is what it is. And what it is vastly beyond anything you may have thought it was. Because it's vastly beyond thinkability. It's vastly beyond analysis. It's vastly beyond definability. I mean, that's the whole platform of this exploration, of this, what I'm calling a yoga. You know, reality is already what it is. This is already this, and it's a lot more than you've ever thought it was. And yet, it is experienceable because it is experienceable. So the fact that you can't get a handle on it does not actually shut it off from you, does not actually make it unavailable. So you can explore it transrationally, because experience is transrational. Experience is not a rational phenomenon. Experience makes no sense. It's not constructed by logic. It's, how does experience happen? Well, here it is. And intelligence, likewise, is intrinsic in what this is. Intelligence is not some add-on that human beings supply. You know, every quark knows exactly how to be itself and how to interact with every other quark in the inconceivable precision, this astounding dance of whatever it is, can't be said. It's what I call intelligence. And you know how to experience every quark that appears within your field of experience. You know, how do you know how to do that? just you. You are this amazing transcendental intelligence just because you happen to be. Yeah, it's just a fact. It's a fact of what is. And what is way beyond what people think it is. And that's really the opportunity that we get to take advantage of here, is to notice how experience transcends human worldview. And then you're beyond humanity. You're beyond a human frame of reference, and you can trip on that. You can explore that. You can take advantage of that, and you might find some really kind of cool stuff. How's everyone feeling? Should we knock off? Technically, we can go about another 10 minutes, but we can knock off if people are feeling toasted. This stuff kind of has an attrition rate, I know. It does on me anyway.
Yeah, it feels good.
Yeah? Yeah, no, I agree. It feels great. It's fun. Well, I'm going to pull a plug. Because I have to pee. So good night, online people.